are already live on LinkedIn and on YouTube, which is pretty cool. Let me see if I can get some recording going as well. It normally goes automatically, but let's see. There we go. Awesome. Perfect. And then I'll start with a brief introduction. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Master Your Exit live show powered by The Big Exit. I'm Lynn, and together with Graham, will be your host for today. And on this Master Your Exit live show, we bring practical insights, expert interviews, and tools to help small business owners like you prepare for your big exit. Now, this live show airs every Tuesday at 7 a.m. in Los Angeles. Good morning if you're on that side of the world, 10 a.m. in New York, or 3 p.m. in London. And we keep each show short and simple, about 30 minutes maximum. If you're tuning in on YouTube or on LinkedIn right now, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching. If you're here in our studio, that's awesome too. Feel free to send in questions via the chat function, and then we can answer them during this show as well. And if you're catching this episode later, because we are recording all of the episodes, you can find all of them on our website, thebigexit.co/master your exit shows, with a little dash in every little word in between, or you can listen to the audio version on your favorite podcast platform. Now, that's it for the introduction for today. I have Graham with me here as well. And as usual, preparing to sell their business, bringing it on the market, like what's been going on in your world. And Graham was like, let's talk a little bit about what business owners should do in those first 6 months after they sold their business, which I think is a great idea. We also talked about it on last week's show when I had Jo Wood, who sold her bookkeeping business back in 2023. And we also spoke about that very unique phase in your life where you've sold your business, where you've probably spent years and years and years starting, building, growing, scaling, and then you sell it. And then there's this period of time that is unprecedented. You've never done anything like this before, probably. And we hear a lot of business owners say, which I think is great. Where did the idea come from to have a chat about those 6 months in post-exit life?
I don't know whether it was your internet connection or mine, but it faded for a bit. So I
Oh,
got
so
the
sorry,
last
might be
five
mine.
words, but anyway, I'll go with that. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's the time of the year where it's holiday season in a lot of places, even if it's a few weeks off for Christmas and New Year. And I'm in the Southern Hemisphere, so we have our summer break, so it's equivalent to the European, July, August period. And I guess part of the discussion came around that. You go on vacation or you go on holiday and you have 2, 3 weeks, even as an entrepreneur, you're doing well if you can take 2 weeks off because your business is running. But the point is, after 2 weeks, whether it's being on the ski slopes or whether it's being on the beaches or what have you, like even then, most entrepreneurs start to get a little bit of itchy feet. Um, so this notion of wow, you sell your business, you get this big exit, and you basically become, you know, in the pursuit of leisure for the rest of your life, I think is a bit of a misguided notion. And that's where I guess the topic came from is let's talk a little bit about that.
Mm.
And there's also a time which, after a sale or an exit can be quite an emotional time. So, you don't want to go do anything silly in those first few weeks or months or whatever that maybe compromises everything you work so hard for. So that, yeah, was really, I guess, the backdrop for the conversation. We've only got 15, 20 minutes. And yeah, it would be good just to talk about what are some of the things we've seen? What are some of maybe the mistakes? What shouldn't you do? And then what are
Mm-hmm.
2 or 3 things that perhaps you should do once if you're
Yeah.
fortunate enough to have gone through a big exit,
Yeah.
to do after that?
I think you're touching on a really great point, which is like it is very unlikely for an entrepreneur, unless maybe you're selling because you hit retirement age, and then even still. But when you're selling, when you're a little bit younger than retirement age, it is very unlikely, or at least for what I've seen and with the entrepreneurs that I know and the ones that have sold their businesses, they get itchy feet pretty quickly, So for them to just, take this leisure time and time off indefinitely is like they can't even fathom that, how that would look like. That's one thing. Secondly, what I also see with a lot of entrepreneurs is, I mean, you're a small business owner as well. I am too, so you will recognize this, is we are very highly fueled on adrenaline, on all kinds of stress related hormones. We are used to living at a very fast pace. We are used to being, the one that solves all the problems, or the one that is needed, or the one that is, like making sure everything keeps running, and all of these things. So there's a lot of, I think, hormonal mess up that is happening in the body for a lot of entrepreneurs, because in general they carry a lot more weight and a lot more stress than I would say maybe the average person does. And I think once you kind of take the stressor away, which is the business and the team and the clients and everything that goes with it, because you've sold the business, a lot of business owners become very uncomfortable because they're missing the adrenaline. They don't feel all of these hormones that they're used to having, like rushing through their bodies for so many years. And a lot of them, because of that, and I don't think a lot of them realize that it is a purely, it's more of a hormonal thing than it is a mental thing. But a lot of business owners go on a spiral into, like depression or burnout, or like just really have no sense of purpose, of meaning, of like, why would I even bother waking up in the morning? So I think there's that part which I see that is happening quite a lot. And I think people, advisors in exit planning, do tell their clients that that might happen and it's likely going to happen. But I don't think it's a thing that we understand very well, and we don't address very well. I don't know if you've seen that with your clients, Graham, but yeah.
Absolutely. I think, in the last few shows, we spoke a little bit about what are some of the sort of emotional readiness things in that actually prevent an exit from taking place. And this is actually quite a natural, I guess, segue from there, because a lot of those same things, like, where business owners maybe take the identity from their business, or they don't know what's next. A lot of those things that actually end up sabotaging or stopping a lot of deals from happening, those sort of emotional factors, those are the very things which kind of come to play in the time afterwards. And
Mm,
I see it. I do see it quite often. Yeah, as you say, a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, they're problem solvers. They're driven by purpose. And then when that disappears, it's okay. What next? So a lot of people think, oh well, you've got all this financial security now. Now you can go and you've got all this time on your hand. But yeah, I don't think entrepreneurs are wired that way. So
mm,
what happens in that next 6 months is really, really important. And it differs, right? If you've been building a business for 3 years and then you exit, it's very different to somebody who's been building a business for 35 years and then exit. So it's not a one size fits all thing. But let's assume for purposes of today's discussion that you built a fairly substantial business, you've been in it for 10, 15 years, and now you've exited and you've got $10 million, let's call it, in your bank account. So you technically never
a
have to
lot of
work
spare
again.
time. Yeah, and a lot
What
of
if?
spare time. Yeah.
Yeah, now
And
what?
I think that, like that luxury position that maybe other people will see or decide that you are in, and you have lots of money on your hands, lots of time on your hands, which is a luxury position to be in, adds, I think, even more to then that feeling of being lost. It's like, okay, now I have all these opportunities. What am I going to do next? In combination with, the adrenaline that is starting to go down, the cortisol that is starting to go down. Like, I'm not an MD or anything like that, or a general practitioner or anything like that, but these two things in combination with each other, I think, like, the body calms down. You have all this luxury in terms of time and money. I think what I see a lot of entrepreneurs do, which is something that I would strongly advise against, is jumping into the next thing. Because you have time and you have money and you get pitched. Literally, as soon as people know you've sold your business and there's a lot of cash in your bank account, you're going to get pitched by private bankers. You're going to get pitched by entrepreneurs who are looking seed investment. You're going to get pitched by all kinds of people who are like, they've got money. I want some of that to do my own little thing. And I've seen so many business owners fall into that trap. They jump immediately into the next thing that is being pitched to them. They get really excited. They're feeling that adrenaline again that they maybe have missed for a couple of months, and they interpret it as this is the right journey for me to go on, rather than, oh, I have really missed this feeling of adrenaline, but this is not necessarily the right thing for me to go and chase. I don't know if you've seen that, but I've seen this countless times happening.
I think it happens a lot. We talk about what should you do in those 6 months, but yeah, as you say, one of the things you
You
shouldn't
should
do
not do.
is go and suddenly become a venture capitalist, angel investor, whatever it is. Now, there's a bunch of reasons for it. One is, just because you've built a successful, let's say, online marketing, online business, okay, selling something, okay, or you built a successful agency, doesn't now, and you might have lots of money in your bank, doesn't now suddenly make you a great investor. Okay. You've done perhaps one thing well, you've got an exit, but everyone assumes that, right? You've got money in your pocket. And I see a lot of exited founders make this mistake. They set up their own investment fund, their own angel fund, their own seed fund, and they don't know the first thing about investing, okay, the investing process. So that's a big mistake a lot of people make. And then also the thing, jumping straight back in, not, obviously you're not going to wait 5 years and do nothing, but I think it's a really good time just to pause and reflect. And when you get that itch to, I want to do something again after 2 weeks, like, actually push through that, and there's a bunch of things you can do there. Maybe you've been on a nice vacation. I mean, maybe you can just jump back in on that, Lynn. Is a lot of people like, if they've got a big windfall from an exit, is do something fun, go on a
Yeah.
world trip, or go do something that's on your bucket list that you always wanted to do with your family or something like that. I see, exited founders make the same mistake. They don't do that. They think, oh, now I've got all this money, I've got to protect it. And then they don't do any of that. So it's about, I think, certainly blocking up that sort of time period and saying, okay, for the next 6 months, let's break it up into month one, month two, month three, month four, month five, and actually accept that there's going to be a process. But what I see from a lot of exit founders is don't do anything for at least the next 6 months. That's a long
Just
enough time that
enjoy.
you don't, yeah, enjoy it. Don't go and rush into the next thing straight away. And there are going to be a lot of temptations, a month in, 2 months in, but I think give it 6 months, and figure it out. Where does 6 months come from? It's a bit of a thumbsuck, but that's been my experience in talking to lots of exited founders, and it seems to be kind of the sweet spot to kind of enjoy yourself, think things through, and then figure out what's next.
Yeah. I think that enjoying part, it's probably one of the things that most people will do after they sold their business. They'll be like, I'm going to buy that really nice car, or I'm going to take my family on a really lovely vacation that we wanted to, like we've been dreaming about for the last couple of years and things like that. So I think that enjoyment I see happening most of the time, but it also seems to be pretty short-lived. It's like that one trip or that one thing or whatever, and then they go on a buying spree, which is also part of that enjoyment. Buy a new house, buy a new car, buy a yacht, buy a helicopter, whatever it is that you want to buy. So there's that phase, and I think that is great. I mean, you should enjoy that new phase in your life and figure out the things that you love enjoying as well whilst you're in this new phase of your life. Simultaneous, though, I also think that besides enjoying things, it's probably after a while worthwhile to start journaling a little bit. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with journaling, Graham, if that's something that you do as well. I'm a big journal. My journal is actually here. I have it with me pretty much everywhere I go. And I do monthly journaling and I do weekly journaling. And it's the end of the year. So I've spent the last month kind of reflecting on the year that has been and moving forward into the next year that is ahead. If you're unfamiliar with what journaling is, it's basically you write down either with some guidance in terms of questions, for example, but you write down the things that are in your head. And if you're unfamiliar with it, there's a really great book about morning pages, which I really love. And it's basically free writing. So in the morning, you wake up and you just free write, just a piece of paper, a pencil, 3 pages minimum, and you just write down what's in your head and release it. And the practice of that and the taking the time of doing that for like half an hour or even an hour or however long it takes, it is remarkable how much clarity one one's one gets when you're doing this kind of like unconscious writing and like getting stuff out of your head. And I think it's such a powerful tool, specifically when we are in periods of transition, which I think post-exit life is a period of transition. Fill that vacuum and fill that space. But I would advise to not only fill it with enjoyment, but also with some form of journaling, because that will create clarity for you on your next step. More than anything else. I mean, more than having conversations with peers, more than having conversations with your partner, more than joining a board of directors because you've been asked to do that because now you're an exited founder and stuff like that, more than investing in a company, is just journaling and getting your thoughts clear again in this point in time where you're in a transition, basically.
100%. Yeah, and whether it's, as you say, it's a time for reflection. Some people journaling works, other people it's other forms of, could be meditation, it could be reflection, it could be
Beach walks.
drawing even, yeah. And I think that's an important process. I think the other thing I want to just flag is, particularly for successful businesses, and by definition, if you've exited, it's usually been a successful exit. But the notion that a profitable business that you were running, it doesn't mean you're suddenly richer. You've now got a lump sum. If you've had a successful business and let's say you've exited at 5 or 6 or 7 times, let's call it profit before tax or EBITDA or whatever measure has been used to measure that, is sometimes the realization hits, particularly for younger exited founders, like in their 30s and 40s, is that, okay, now I've got a finite sum of money. I'm not getting this great dividend every year out of the business. I've got money that I need to invest wisely, because I could retire. And we often hear people talking about $3 or $4 or $5 million being a small exit. And for a lot of people, it's like, oh, that's not enough for me to retire. Like, let's be clear, that becomes a lifestyle choice. If in your early 40s you can't retire on $5 million, it's more likely that your lifestyle gap and your funding gap is divergent. So that's something you need to consider. Is it enough to retire? Is it enough to maybe just buy you 2 or 3 years to think about what do you want to do next.
Mm.
And that's an important process. Is that financial planning is does this enable the lifestyle that I want to live? Is it enough? Do I need to work again? Do I need to be more prudent in how I spend? All those things. That's an important step and probably one of the most important. But don't do that, day one after your, your check is in the bank account. Wait a month or so. Spoil yourself that sort of discretionary spend, and then a month or two in, you need to start thinking about these things.
Yeah, and I feel like journaling can help with that as well. I mean, there's one thing about, filling out the spreadsheets and maybe sitting together with a financial planner or a financial advisor. There's that part in like, how do I invest this money wisely? But there's also this part in you that needs to get clarity on, do I still want to do something else? How does that going to look like? Where do I see, myself living for the next decade with, my family and my loved ones and things like that. And I think these two come together, it's there's that practical financial number crunching part and like, let's be smart about this money that I have received. But then there's also that part of like, what does smart mean for me and the life that I want to live and where we are as a family or as a unit. And I think that clarity comes from the journaling part as well. So, but yeah, they work really well together. So I think that's great advice. You will get pitched literally from the moment you sell your business by literally any private banker, any financial advisor, like everybody and anybody will give you a phone call to give you all kinds of advice on what to do, and just picking someone that you can work with for the next couple of decades. That's a whole other thing in and of itself. And do your
Mhm.
homework. I would advise as well to do that. But yeah, just be mindful and take your time. There is no rush. You don't need to make any of these important financial decisions right now. You don't need to make it next month, not even in 6 months. You have time and space, and allow that time and space to be there and to, support you in your journey on what is next. I've seen
Yeah, I
in
mean, I've had.
people who, oh, sorry, I was just about to say, like, I've just seen people jumping into the next thing straight away, and it literally has never worked out. Like, never. I've never seen it being successful. And I might be proven wrong in 2026, but for everybody that I've seen who have jumped straight into the next thing within just a couple of weeks, a couple of months, it never really ends well, because it's not done from a pure intentional point. It's done out of fear. It's done out of feeling purposeless. It's done out of not the right motivators, I would say, to jump into the next thing.
Sometimes even ego gets in the way. Now the
Yep,
first thing someone does is put on
true.
their LinkedIn profile, exited founder. So that somehow changes, what they do. But I think I just want to touch on, and this is not financial advice, but what I've seen a few exited founders do is, they're very intentional about how they invest that pot of money. As I say, for that first period, whether it's 3 or 6 months, you don't need to go make a bet on saying, I'm going to go and buy Bitcoin low and sell it high and double my winnings. Don't think of that period as a casino period. And what I see a lot of people doing is taking maybe 5% of their earnings, putting it in a spend account that they can enjoy themselves, have the holiday, buy the car, whatever they want, and literally just put the other 95% of their I don't want to call it their winnings, their proceeds from the sale, just put that into a lockdown account. It doesn't have to be earning the hugest interest or what have you, but that they can't touch it for 6 months. And that also keeps the investors, everybody selling you the next best way to double your money or the next venture. So
Yeah,
actually, I've seen people do it. They put it in like a lockdown escrow where they can't touch it for 6 months. And that gives them the time to think about how they can deal with that wisely.
amazing. Love that. Great. I think great pieces of advice here. Enjoy, think about what you're going to do with the money as well, journal about it, get some advice here
Yeah.
and there. These are like, I think, a lot of the things that you should probably be doing. I mean, you don't have to do anything and don't listen to us for sure. Please do what it is that your heart desires. But these are some of the things that we would recommend to do rather than jumping into the next thing, and just being comfortable with the void that is being created and pushing through that feeling of discomfort of you not knowing what you're doing and not knowing what the reason is you wake up in the morning, and be comfortable with all of that discomfort that comes with it, and the conversations that are going to take place about the fact that you have all of a sudden this windfall of money and time, and people have all kinds of judgments on us. There's just a lot of stuff for you to come to terms with, I would say, in your post-exit life. I think one last thing that I want to touch upon, because Jo spoke about it as well last week. I asked her if she had literally like celebrated once the sale was done. And I asked it because I have very often heard from owners they didn't really celebrate that specific moment in time, not the enjoyment afterwards and the trip and the card and whatever it is that you want to have, but like that very specific point in time where you celebrate. And she said I didn't celebrate it because the selling process was so emotional. I had family who were also shareholders. They were not really excited about selling. It was such a strenuous, stressful time that once it was done, I didn't celebrate it. I just wanted to kind of didn't take the time for it because there was just so many things going on, and I didn't really feel that great about it, I would say. Anything that you have seen there, Graham, as well? Because I have heard various different versions of the same story that people told me. Like, I was scared to celebrate. I was scared of what people might think. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Even if I wanted to, I didn't because I thought, what other people might think and say and stuff like that.
I agree with the sentiment there. It's an athlete wins a race at the Olympics, or I'm a big F1 fan, they go on the podium and they spray the champagne. It's just a small symbolic thing. And I think it is important, you've built, you've sold, you should be proud of that. And it could just be a meal out with your friends, or your close friends, or your family, or whatever the case might be. But I think just taking a day to recognize and celebrate that, even if you don't feel like doing that, I think it's a good emotional step to take.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. I also feel a lot of founders kind of regret that moment passing and then kind of like not having, like pinpointed it on the calendar and like that was the day that I really celebrated and I popped the champagne or whatever it is that you want to do. So I think celebrate, enjoy, journal, do all of these things for at least 6 months, and then maybe consider, your next move or what it is that you prefer to do next in this next phase of your life, I would say.
Absolutely. And I guess that brings us to the end of the show. We've got the wrap up
Exactly.
and going
I
into
think
the
that's
holidays now. I'm sure we're all going to have a bit of champagne and a bit of celebration. So maybe that's
absolutely.
a good way to end the show.
Absolutely. Non-alcoholic champagne for me. I don't know for you, Graham, but I've jumped on the ship of not drinking alcohol for 3 years already now, which is crazy. But anyway, that's a
Fantastic.
little side note there. That's a wrap for this week's episode and also for this year's. That's also a wrap of the Master Your Exit Life show. Thank you so much for joining me and Graham today, or Graham and me today. I hope you're leaving with some valuable insights to help you prepare for your big exit and also prepare for that post-exit life as well. Now, remember, you can catch the replay of this episode and all of the other future episodes or former episodes, sorry, on our website at thebigexit.co/master your exit shows, or listen on your favorite podcast platform. And that's it for now. This is a wrap for this year, I would say. Also, we're not planning a new season of the Master Your Exit live show just yet. So, thank you so much for being here, joining us, asking your questions. If you've been a guest on the show, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. And for sure, thank you so much, Graham, as well, for being, that trustworthy, I wouldn't say sidekick because you were not a sidekick, but really a co-host for this show as well. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time, the conversations that we had, and I'm wishing you a lovely end of year and festive season as well, and a great next year too.
Fantastic, Lynn, and thanks to all the listeners and everyone who's been watching the shows. Have a good end of the year and fantastic 2026.
Thank you all.